Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday. Uh, Hope you guys are having a good week. Good to see you all again. And today we're going to talk about the Columbian Exchange. It's going to be a much shorter lecture than Monday's lecture and Tuesday's lecture. I know you're grateful for that, but I want to thank you for your attention on Monday and your attention on Tuesday. I know those were long lectures, but learning about the gunpowder empires, the maritime empires, super important. And now it's time to start memorizing those. So make flashcards. Make a flashcard for every empire. Put the name of the empire on one side, some key identifying terms or features about the empire on the other side of the flashcard, or use Quizlet. And yeah, study them, memorize them. Make sure you're ready to go for May 14th or whenever we have our exam. Quick reminder, the exit tickets aren't due until the next day. So I want you to take your time on them. I want you to do well on them. I want you to review the lecture, review your notes, read the prompt carefully, and then answer it carefully. You don't need to finish it before you move on to Spanish class. So it's not due until the next day. Take your time. Okay, we're going to start today looking at some of the data from yesterday. Sorry, the sun's coming in all of a sudden. Looking at your exit tickets from Monday. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. Okay, so today we're talking about the Columbian Exchange. Before we get into the Columbian Exchange, which I have a feeling you guys know pretty well, I want to look at the SAQ you guys did on Monday. So this is the prompt. Remember, you had a picture of the Ottomans collecting Christian boys, enlisting boys from their empire's Christian subjects in the Balkans to train them for service in the Ottoman army and bureaucracy. A, describe one way in which practices such as the one depicted in the image facilitated the growth of the Ottoman Empire. B, 600 to 1750, explain how one state other than the Ottoman Empire used the contributions of different religious or ethnic groups in ways similar to that shown in the image. And C, for the same time period, explain how one state other than the Ottoman Empire used policies to exclude certain religious or ethnic groups from participating in political or military affairs. So this is a good example of an almost there response. I want you to read these and I want you to think, does this earn a point? Would this get the SAQ point? So let's read the first one together. One way the practice used in the photo above impacts the growth of the Ottoman Empire, establishing loyalty. They made alliances, allowing them to expand and get ideas and culture from those other places. Think about that one. Do you think it earns a point or no point? Take a second, think about it. If you said no point, you're right. A would not earn a point. We're going to think about why it wouldn't earn a point in a second. How about B? The Mughal Empire used religious tolerance and allowed people of different religions to be local tax collectors. They used the system to establish trust between the people and the government. Do you think this one would earn a point? I'm going to go here. This is so close. I think with one additional word, it definitely earns a point. Right now, I'm not sure. It might be up to a grader. Some graders might say yes, other graders might say no. You don't want to take that risk. So we're going to say this one's a no. but we'll talk about that in a second also. The last one, the Ming Dynasty. Let's change that to Qing Dynasty. The Qing Dynasty used the Manchu system that was used to identify the Han people. The hairstyles were mandatory for all men, and the penalty for not having the haircut was death. How about that one? Earn a point? No point. What do you think? This one, if it's Qing Dynasty, not Ming Dynasty, I think that earns a point. So why does C earn a point? B almost earns a point. A is a little bit off. Why? What is the difference between C, B, and A? I think you're on the right track. It's about the number of specific terms used. So A needs a lot of work. B needs a little tiny, literally just one word. And C is almost on the right track. I think it was a spelling mistake, not a actual mistake. So let's look at how we can fix each of these. So A needs some work. The Ottoman Empire established loyalty over who? So name who the Ottomans conquered over conquered Christians. Don't use pronouns like they. Anytime you have they, just change it. Make it a proper noun. Ottomans made alliances through the millet system. So that's how the Ottomans achieved loyalty with the Christians, is that they had the millet system, and they gave the millet system, gave the Christians autonomy to maintain their culture and religion. That one needed some more specific terms. It needed more evidence. It needed more direction. B was almost there, so close. The Mughal Empire used religious tolerance, excellent, and allowed people of different religions. Don't be vague when you can be specific. Allowed Hindus to be local tax collectors in the zamindar system. They used the zamindar system to establish trust between the Hindu people and the Muslim government. See, that only took one, literally, if you just added zamindar to that, I'm sure you'd get the point, 100%. For part C, I think the only thing that we needed to change was that Ming to Qing. I hope that was a spelling error, not an actual content error. But yeah, the Qing used the hair system, which is known as the Q system, to identify Han people. The hairstyles were mandatory for all Han men, and the penalty for not having the haircut was death. So I think all three of those would earn points with these revisions. If we go back and look at the first round, B almost earns a point. C probably earns a point. A needs some help. But all three of them are almost there. They just need a little bit more specific content, key terms to get 100%. So next time you get an SAQ, work on that, add in that specific evidence. Use your notes when you write the SAQ. Totally fine. Okay, the Columbian Exchange. So the idea of the Columbian Exchange has been around for a while, but it really takes hold when Alfred Crosby publishes an entire book about it called The Columbian Exchange. Huge book, came out in the 1970s. So even though we're only going to spend about 10 minutes talking about the Columbian Exchange now, the impacts of the Columbian Exchange and the importance of the Columbian Exchange cannot be understated. I mean, this is a whole book on it that just got republished for its 30th anniversary. So Alfred Crosby introduces this idea. The Columbian Exchange is named after Christopher Columbus because Christopher Columbus united these two continents that had been separate since the ice bridge of the Ice Age 13,000 years ago. So for 13,000 years, the Americas had no contact, or very little contact, depending on what theorists you look at, almost no contact with Afro-Eurasia. The definition of the Columbian Exchange that you need to know is that the Columbian Exchange refers to the intentional and unintentional biological exchange between the Old World. Old World is the Eastern Hemisphere, Afro-Eurasia, and the New World, the Western Hemisphere, also known as the Americas. So it's a biological exchange. It's both intentional. People brought things intentionally. They brought cows and horses and sugar, cotton from the old world to the new world. They intentionally brought back from the new world to the old world things like bananas and tomatoes and potatoes. But there was also unintentional things, like they didn't intentionally bring rats from the old world to the new world. They didn't intentionally bring diseases. But it's definitely a biological exchange. This is not about trade. The Columbian exchange is not trading goods. The Columbian exchange is not the Atlantic system that we're going to talk about tomorrow. The Columbian exchange is not spreading religion or ideas. It is a biological exchange, the exchange of species. And this exchange of species is going to have some serious impacts. When we looked at this map before, you guys identified well that some of the most significant biological species that go from the Americas to Europe in this direction. I think if you identified which ones are the most important, you kind of picked on corn and maybe tomatoes and potatoes. But I love looking at this map just to remember and remind myself all of the foods that I love to eat, where they came from. So some of my favorite foods are on this list, going from this direction, from the Americas to the New World. And also the Old World things that go from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas: coffee, bananas, citrus, sugar, all the grains, livestock, and of course, diseases. We're going to go into the impacts, but I can't emphasize enough how revolutionary this biological exchange is for the planet. It creates whole new environments, like introducing animals to the Americas changes the Americas environment. And we're going to look at some of the biggest impacts now, but there are a few moments in history where the world changes so much, where it goes from two continents that are completely separate, that have no interaction, to they're having interaction all the time across the Atlantic Ocean. And as a result, culture changes, biology changes, foods that people eat change. So we're going to look at the major impacts now. The most significant impact, as you guys already know, is the diseases, the crowd diseases that Jared Diamond talks about, diseases that come from living in close quarters with domesticated animals, with cows and pigs and chickens, and oftentimes sleeping in the same room as those animals, as many people did for thousands of years. Living in close quarters with animals creates disease. We know this now too, because the disease, the coronavirus, came from some kind of domesticated wild animal, whether it was or not even domesticated, from a wild animal that transferred, that was in a cage, either from bats or from a snake or a pangolin. So in some way, an animal in close quarters with human created the coronavirus. And in the same way, all of the diseases that impacted the Americas were known as crowd diseases that came from the domestication of animals in Afro-Eurasia that took place thousands of years ago with the Neolithic Revolution. In the Americas, there are not large domesticated animals. The only significant animal that's domesticated in the Americas is the llama, but there aren't pigs, there aren't cows, there aren't chickens. There is the turkey that's domesticated, but the Native Americans and the Amerindians they don't have livestock that they're living in close quarters with. So the impact of this disease is profound. It wipes out 20 to 30 million Native Americans. That's hard to imagine. In Mexico, the disease killed 60 to 90% of the population. This is over about 150 years, but still 60 to 90% of the native population killed by diseases. As you know, this is what made it so easy for the Spanish to conquer the Americas, because they basically were conquering unoccupied territory. The people who lived there had died off. So diseases is the most significant exchange, biological exchange, the diseases that go from the old world to the new world. There is one disease, however, that goes from the new world, from the Americas to the old world, and that is syphilis, a sexually transmitted disease that Europeans acquired in the Americas, and then they brought back to Europe as sexual disease, transmitted diseases transfer. In terms of crops, the most important crop that goes from the new world, the Americas, to the old world is the potato. The potato is an important crop because it increases food production in Europe, it increases food production in Africa, it increases food production in Asia. Why? Because it grows in soil where other crops can't grow. Especially potatoes grow really well in mountains. They grow in hills and mountains, and their yield, the calories per acre of a potato, is much higher than the calories per acre of wheat or other grains. So you get more calories for the amount of land that you plant with potatoes. And so potatoes lead to an incredible population growth in Europe, Africa, and Asia. The other key crop that I don't have a slide for here, but I should, is maize, of course, corn. And just like potatoes, corn can grow on mountainsides very easily. It grows in sandy soil where other crops can't grow very well. So maize or corn is another super important crop that moves from the Americas to the to the old world. And as a result of those maize and potatoes, what happens to populations in Afro-Eurasia? What happens when they have access to new crops that grow in places where they couldn't grow food before? You guys know this, I know you do. Populations go up. Other important crops that go from the Americas to Afro-Eurasia that are super important just in terms of cultural cuisine are tomatoes and chili peppers. If you think about spicy Thai food or spicy Indonesian food or hot Chinese food that have those super spicy, full of chilies, none of those foods existed before the Columbian Exchange. They didn't eat spicy Szechuan food in China before the chili pepper arrived after Christopher Columbus. Pizza and pasta made with tomatoes didn't exist in Italy before the Columbian Exchange. So the Columbian Exchange also leads to profound cultural changes, especially cuisine, changing the food that people eat. Some of my favorite Indian curries are loaded with chili pepper and tomato, and those curries wouldn't have existed before the 1500s. And in addition to creating new cuisines, this exchange of food also creates, offers more variety to the cuisine and more vitamins and more nutrition. And then I would put these up. I mean, if you're going to list Columbian Exchange goods in order of importance, diseases, I think, is the most important. Potatoes and corn is probably the second most important. Cash crops are going to be third for me, but they're probably tied with potatoes and corn. The cash crops are going to lead us to tomorrow's lecture about the Atlantic system. But the cash crops are tobacco, which is a native to the Americas, sugar, which is Old World, and cotton, also Old World. And these cash crops all are grown on plantations. They're all grown in the Americas, where there is a lot of land because most of the people have died who live on that land. Most of the Native Americans are gone, so there's a lot of unoccupied land. So you can establish a large plantation pretty easily if you're a European. And these cash crops have incredibly high demand. Sugar is used to sweeten tea and coffee. It's used to make desserts, used to make molasses. And the most valuable form of sugar during the early modern era was rum. Cotton, also high demand, and tobacco, which is the one crop native to the Americas, becomes extremely popular in Europe. Smokehouses and smoking parlors start to pop up all over Europe, starting in the early 1600s. And people love to smoke tobacco. So those three crops, the exchange of those crops from old world to new, in the case of sugar and cotton, really transform economies. And as we're going to see tomorrow, they transform labor systems. So quick notebook check. Can you answer, how did the Columbian exchange affect demographics in the Americas? So what happened in the Americas because of the Columbian exchange? Do you know that? Do you know that well? How did the Columbian exchange affect the demographics of Afro-Eurasia? What does demographic mean, by the way? We should know that. But demographic refers to people, population. And to what extent did the cultivation of cash crops in the Americas change world history? We're going to visit that tomorrow, but I want you to be thinking about that for tomorrow's lecture as well. The other huge impact of the Columbian exchange is the domesticated animals that move from Afro-Eurasia to the New World. So cows, pigs, and horses. These animals are going to thrive in the Americas, again, because there's wide open spaces, there's no natural predators, there's not many people because most of the Native Americans died because of disease. These species are going to thrive, they're going to explode, populations are going to explode. There were herds of wild cattle and horses that reached 50 million animals. And the horse is a key technology of conquest too. The Spanish used horses to their advantage to conquer the Aztec and to conquer the Inca. But the horse also was adopted and embraced by Native American groups. The Apache and the Comanche become some of the best breeders and riders and horse, almost on the scale of the Mongols. They're able to ride horses. They breed some of the best horses in the world. They can use horses to hunt. They can use horses to fight. And the Comanche and the Apache are incredible horsemen. And these animals also bring a significant need to change the environment. So cows and pigs also bring the need for fences. So all of a sudden you start to see fences going up all of the Americas. Pigs go feral. The wild boar that live in the south of the United States, those are wild domesticated animals. They weren't native to the Americas. They become wild animals over centuries after being introduced by Europeans in the 1500s. But then there's also a lot of rodents, rabbits, rats, mice, all of these animals that come over from the Americas and come over from Europe to the Americas, and they change environments too. They bring a lot of disease with them. But rabbits have the ability to destroy productive agriculture, actually, if they breed too rapidly. So there's a lot of consequences of the animals arriving. And last but not least, we want to think about how the Columbian exchange affects the environment. One of the major environmental effects of the Columbian Exchange is the deforestation that comes with the arrival of animals and Europeans to the Americas, and Americas in which most of the Native Americans have died. And the Europeans are going to start to cut down trees that they need for shipbuilding and construction, but they also start to cut down trees to make ranch land so that their cows can graze, so that their animals have nice open pasture, what they're used to. And they introduce slash and burn agriculture to burn the trees, cut down the trees. So one of the main environmental effects of the Columbian Exchange early on is deforestation. That's about all I got for the Columbian Exchange. Think about what the major impacts are in Afro-Eurasia and the Americas. And your oral drill tomorrow is going to be identifying which goods are from the Americas and which goods are from Afro-Eurasia. So make sure you study those tonight for your oral drill tomorrow. All right, thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.